Thank you for joining us today. This is our series, Steve, Daniel, and I talking with you about AI governance and our 90-day plan with N-Dash. We're going to go ahead and get started right now. Thanks for joining us today. So, AI governance 90-day plan from principles to practice. This is our framework in 3 30-day phases. Those of you who joined us last time know that we did an overview of the 3 phases of this plan. So this month and for the next 2 months following, we're going to go through and do a bit of a deeper dive. My ChatGPT joke that only I laugh about. We will delve, as those of you who spend a lot of time with ChatGPT know that the word delve comes up a lot. We will go deeply into each of those 3 phases over the next 3 months, starting with today in phase 1. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the agenda, defining governance. So if you've been with us before in prior sessions, this will be a bit of a refresher, but defining governance. What are the core concepts and pillars from an N-Dash perspective, but we think from a general good governance perspective, what are those core concepts and what are those pillars? Then we'll talk a little bit about the N-Dash AI governance framework. And this plan specifically, the 90-day plan, this practical framework. This session, this hour, we're going to again go deep in the phase 1, which is the explore and align phase. Next month and the month following, respectively, we'll talk about phase 2 that builds on phase 1, obviously, where we design a prototype, and then phase 3 where we pilot and evaluate. And that gets us through the 90-day phase, the 90-day plan, those 3 phases, and actually gets us governance up and running in a realistic way, pragmatically, in 90 days. So from there, we'll talk about moving forward, and then we'll just go ahead and get started. So as we do that, a little bit about N-Dash. So N-Dash is the company that Steve and I work for. Steve is a co-founder. I've joined in part because of this mission that N-Dash exists, was founded to make work feel better, because we believe that human-centered work is the foundation of sustainable performance, and it's good on all levels. What the name N-Dash means, not the M-Dash that you may be familiar with, the ChatGPT, but an N-Dash is a punctuation symbol that represents the connection from A to B. What we do, and using that analogy, using that metaphor, our intent, our desire, our reason for being is to help organizations move from where they are and where they wish to be. That is the N-Dash, and that is what we wish to be. And again, why we do it. We are here for outcomes. Those are incredibly important in any organization, for-profit or nonprofit. Those outcomes matter. The mission matters. But we also know that to do that, we need to do the best for the individuals who are part of those teams, and that there is purpose and ownership and clarity, not just frantic activity in team members. It's better for the organization. It's better for the product. It's better for the service. It's better for the customers, and it's better for the people that do the work. So we really find a great deal of purpose and joy in helping folks improve in these ways. So that's a little bit about us and why we do what we do. From there, the 3 pillars as we see them of responsible AI, and this might be slightly different than what some of you expect when you think about what governance is and what responsible AI is. So the first is governance. And when we think about governance, many of us who have been involved with governance in organizations, this is what we think about as far as what governance is just one piece of processes, guardrails, policies, etc., that overarching structure to make sure that the right things are happening and that everyone knows what the right things are through those policies and through training, etc. That is the traditional idea of governance. And that's part of what's responsible AI from our perspective as far as these pillars, but it's certainly not all of it. So what else do we believe is a essential part of responsible AI? The second really is ethics, the why behind things. So if governance is how we do this, why do we do this? The ethics of using AI responsibly aren't just about avoiding being sued. They're really important to true back to the mission and the vision and the reason that our organization exists, and how we agree that we operate, our North Star. So things like fairness, transparency, and impact our outcomes. Those are also essential and important for responsible AI from our perspective. And then finally, how does this happen? So, policies and procedures, even having a strong North Star, without good leadership to help set the tone, to help make sure that the right things are happening, to lead by example, to foster that culture of responsibility, the first two of those three pillars are useless. So we find that these three are counterbalancing and incredibly important for overall good governance in a responsible AI, holistic way, to have a responsible and ethical use of AI in your organization. Steve, is there anything that you'd like to add on this slide as far as how we see these three foundational pillars of responsible AI and what that looks like?
Yeah, all of these are really critical, and it's really crucial before you, as a company or as an individual in a company, go all in on any AI software or methods or processes. It's really crucial to get on the same page with your team, with your leadership, and in terms of those ethics. So what's acceptable and why? That reason why is really, really important. Like just having arbitrary, yeah, we can do this, we can't do this. Once you find a new situation, you can't extend that and apply it to it because you don't have a reason for your governance processes and policies. So yeah, all these are really critical for when you're just starting out your AI deployment and implementation.
Thank you. And thanks for calling that out, because again, it's very obviously important for us at NDash. That why, the reason for being, is really important, as Steve had said, and to have that as something that can guide the future, not just the present, for scenarios that we may not even have encountered yet. So on that note, without what Steve had just mentioned, without having that true why, what are our ethics? What are our boundaries? What are some of the things that can happen without that and without governance? Why are Steve and I investing the time to share these thoughts with all of you? Well, for those of you who were here with the last session, this may look familiar, but I'm going to click through it pretty quickly. But these are some things that have happened that made the news, and there's exponentially more that haven't. But with AI not being grounded, anchored in values, and with some governance, you have things where syndicated content in newspapers includes AI-generated misinformation. Would you like your customers to receive that? Obviously not. That would be incredibly embarrassing. Some of you remember this is incredibly unfortunate. Google Gemini, when they first released some of their image image generating capabilities, had some well-intended but very poorly executed attempts to bring a level of diversity into the images and historical representations of World War II soldiers. Obviously, that is nowhere near historically accurate, incredibly embarrassing and concerning. Some of these things are funny until they're not, but Taco Bell rethinking about AI drive-through after a man orders 18,000 waters. Elon Musk's Grok chatbot and a number of anti-Semitic posts that have come out. A robot lawyer using AI for law practice got fined $200,000. Air Canada and their chatbot that was lying, using AI for an Airbnb guest that had a damage claim. And then this last one, which again is funny until you think about the ramifications. Cops forced to explain why AI generated police report claimed officer transformed into a frog. That's a real story. And again, it's funny, except the more subtle versions of this that wouldn't have been that extreme don't make the news. But the ramifications and the impacts, especially when unmoored from what Steve had talked about, that why, are huge. And just since we last met last month, here is a new item that has come up, that there is a class action lawsuit against Workday. And that is proceeding forward in California, and it was using AI for resume screening. And now there is a class action lawsuit and a ton of money on the line for improper and unethical use of AI, again, presumably with good intentions, but this is what happened. So you don't want to be in the news like this. That is why we care.
I just had one thing to bring up. I guess we have a little more of this here, but some of these cases, like everything seems like it was in place correctly, but you have to imagine or expect users to try to like penetration test or get more out of your tool. And so the thing about the Taco Bell AI drive-through, that wasn't Taco Bell's fault as much as the fact that a man decided to order 1,000 or 18,000 waters, and and these things like even if it's a good, strong, solid technology and it seems to provide benefits, you really have to think outside the box and how somebody might try to take advantage of the AI that is in place. The cops with the AI generated police report, it seems like it could be a really helpful technology, but without the human intervention, human in the loop, it can really lead to misunderstandings and the wrong people being put to justice for things they didn't do.
Exactly. And so, and thank you for calling that out. That's really important because obviously we're very strong advocates and active users of these technologies. We use them, we believe, responsibly and ethically. And that's what we really want to share with folks. It's not to scare people away from using it. It is to do the right thing so that you can use it in a way that is effective, efficient, and achieves the goals you have without these sorts of ramifications. So a couple of other AI fails, just in case the message is not clear enough, although I imagine you're also reading these things, seeing these things in your LinkedIn or other feeds. But just since we last met, Workday, same company, different study, but they did a study that found that just cleaning up AI mistakes cleans up to 40% of the time that it supposedly saves. 77% of frequent users double or triple check work. I'm one of those that sometimes has to do that as well. More than for work completed by humans. That is a reality of how a lot of this technology exists today. And then another one, wherever you come down on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree that the tool that was used by ICE to identify applicants with previous law enforcement experience falsely flagged those applicants with no experience. My understanding is that it specifically only looked for the word officer. And with that, any of those individuals were qualified. If that is the case, obviously, there are issues with how that technology was implemented. There was no good governance. And so again, we're not saying avoid these tools. We're saying absolutely use them. But this is what happens. These are just these examples that are happening on a daily basis these days if you don't have governance in place. And so these are the problems that we're trying to preempt, to mitigate, to make sure that they just don't happen, with a little bit of lightweight but solid, pragmatic, practical governance. And so we'll talk about our plan and the implementation overview. So in the 90 days, these 3 30-day chunks, phase one, what we'll be talking about more today, is explore and align. And this first phase is really important because we really want to start by, obviously today, almost every organization is using AI in ways that are known and often unknown to the organization. So we want to start by making it visible, that culture of transparency, and bringing it out of the shadows and really acknowledging that use and making sure that that's where we start in terms of where we want to start understanding how it's being used today, where we have risk, and what we can do about it. We want to also, as part of that, have ownership for AI influenced work. And we'll talk a little bit more about why ownership is so important out of the gate before we start really actively using it. And then aligning early AI use to real business priorities. So even though we know most organizations are using AI in some ways today, we really, especially for things that are going to involve some investments of money, time, opportunity costs, et cetera, we really want to focus on a small number of high value business priorities to start using AI. And this framework that we have, our governance framework, includes prioritization as part of it. So next month, after we talk about this for phase one, next month, we'll be talking about phase two, where we design and prototype. Phase three is building upon phases 2 and 1, where we actually pilot and evaluate and measure the impact of that.
So if you missed our webinar last month and want the full picture, we have that recording on YouTube, and you can probably access it on LinkedIn still through our past events page. But that's where you can get the overview of the full 90-day, but without as much detail as we're going to be going into today for phase 1, next month for phase 2, and the following for phase 3.
Absolutely, yes. And if you have any issues or any questions, we'll have our QR codes up here. Feel free to connect with us as well. We'd love to continue that conversation. But yes, definitely, if you haven't seen the first session, you may find it useful to go back and check that out. From there, we'll go ahead and go a little bit deeper in the explore and align phase. So the first, as mentioned, is to get visibility into our current AI use within the organization. We want to get that individual use of public generative AI tools. So if folks are using things like ChatGPT or Gemini as a standalone, Copilot, Perplexity, I could probably fill up the remainder of our time today talking about tools that are available, but I won't do that to either of us. But we want to start looking at who are using those tools that are largely just chatbots that we can access independently through web browsers or our phones. The next is AI features built into tools that people already use. And I think at this point, this is the 11th of February of 2026. Pretty much every tool that we have really is screaming at us to use every AI-enabled feature. So Copilot in Microsoft Suite, that Gemini, Slack, yeah, it's in everything. So it's part of the reason that governance is so important is that it is hard to avoid these tools. You can block access to ChatGPT if you needed to, or its ilk. But if you're already using Microsoft, it's very difficult in a lot of cases to tell it to stop asking you about Copilot. Gemini is the same thing in Google. So everyone is really pushing that. Slack bot can't be turned off. I've tried. So be aware of that. And that's just something that we need to talk about that as far as current use, even if somebody didn't select it, if that's embedded in their tools.
Especially as software developers, if you have any of those types of employees on your team, all of the IDEs, the development environments have built-in AI now, and it's really good to become aware of what people are using and relying on before determining what type of pilot program or use that you need to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also, in addition to those first two steps, and as part of that, we want to understand where AI generated content is being reused in documents, emails, and workflows. So it's not just how are people using that, where are they using it, but what are they doing with what they're finding? And then from that, understanding where we have AI use that is internal, where it's being used for internal purposes, and then things that directly or indirectly are going to be sent to customers. Obviously, anything that goes out to customers or other folks outside of our organization, partners, etc., there's a lot of risk there. So in this, how do we start doing that? So the first things that we would suggest, and there may be some other items, ways that you do this within your teams that are more effective, but things that Steve and I would suggest out of the gate, some ways that we would do this: short, structured conversations with teams and leaders. What are y'all using today? As Steve mentioned, you can talk at your stand-up or at your retro or at planning or any of your standard sessions. What are you using today? You can do things, especially with distributed teams, for surveys or just check-ins, and then a review of the tools that are already in use that have AI capabilities. So as Steve had mentioned, if you're using pretty much any common development tools these days, there's a lot of AI that's built in. Anything else on this one, Steve, or anything else? I'll bring the next item up as well with the goals.
Yeah, the simple surveys or check-ins are an easy way to get a lot of reach within your organization. Google Forms, SurveyMonkey, all those things and then you have an aggregate area where you have all your responses, and then you can actually run like business intelligence on that type of stuff.
And so our goal is really just some basic questions. Again, we want to keep this lightweight. This framework really originated with, and our intent is for small and medium-sized businesses, although it scales quite well. So we have to keep it light. We don't have a whole entire AI team. So what we want to know is, how's it being used today? How do you build it into your work, or how are you using it to build your work? Where is that being reused? And especially, where does it influence those decisions or communication? And here's a mock-up that Steve had created here that I think is a great way to start thinking through that. Steve, you want to talk through this just high level, what this sort of artifact or construct gets us very easily?
Yeah, this here is a kind of a form for tracking AI use within different areas of work in your organization, from client communication, marketing, sales proposals, admin, etc. And who uses it. We have check marks. Basically, this is just a template sample, but you might want to list your employee names or the roles that end up using it, the types of tasks, as well as internal versus external visibility, and whether it influences decisions, commitments. So we kind of lock all of those questions and considerations into one form where you can then visualize. And a lot of times you will do this as like a table in a report or something for your own use, just to see and understand where the highest impact AI uses are across your organization and opportunities as well.
Right. So those risk flags are really important. Those areas as you go through that, where are we using data? Where are we reusing it? Where is it not? So this is, again, just one simple example. You can build your own that's lightweight, but don't make it heavy. Just make it fast, but make it clear and easy to fill out. So the next step, once we understand where it is being used, is to understand where it influences outcomes. So as sort of alluded to with what Steve had said and on that prior slide, not all AI use carries the same weight. And so we really, in phase one, want to really separate out the things where AI use is benign. There's very limited risk. Maybe there's limited value as well. But we really want to know where the risks and the rewards are substantial. And so that we can focus our attention on those with AI use. So some common risks would include things like, are we using AI generated content without being rechecked? Are we starting to replace our actual internal source material for summaries that were AI generated? Is AI suggestions shaping our recommendations or decisions? And there's some value there, but it is a risk. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is a bad thing, but it is something we certainly, if we don't manage that properly, there's a heck of a lot of risk on that. Similarly with that fourth bullet point, where AI generated content is shared outside of the team, that also, there's a lot of risks there. Not that we want bad content shared within the team, but once we send it to customers, partners, collaborators, whatever the case may be, the exponential nature of those potential impacts is just more manifest. These scenarios deserve closer attention because accuracy and judgment do matter more there. The outcome from this part of the process is just that short list of those use cases where ownership and review are really important. So we've got that inventory that we showed on step one. Step two, we can start tagging those and classifying them accordingly. Here's a scenario we'll walk through quickly. So a client proposal for a consulting firm, the PM takes those meeting notes, prior proposal text, and a rough budget, throws it into an AI tool of your choice. In their prompt, they ask for a clear professional proposal summary with recommended scope. And here's where we can get into some trouble, even though this is a good thing to start with. It's not always a good thing to end with. AI generates a 2-page overview that has a refined problem statement. That's probably okay. Recommended 6-month engagement timeline. Ooh, 6 months. That's pretty specific. There may be some risk there. Let's take a look at that. And then the third bullet point is where we really get ourselves into trouble. Language implying experience with a specific compliance standard that the firm has limited exposure or experience with. There we have some risk, and that is not an unknown or unexpected problem with some of these tools. That last bullet point happens. I've seen it happen similarly at least 3 or 4 times. So in this instance, if it's unchecked, the summary replaces rereading the original call transcript. So we didn't go back to the source, and that the AI generated scope language is reused verbatim in that final proposal. So again, no bad intentions, but since we used AI here and that we didn't do our due diligence in those last few steps, there were inaccurate capability claims that reached the client. Again, no bad intentions, but that's what happened. And those are the sorts of things that can happen if we don't have some lightweight proper guidance in place.
And that can lose you the contract, the opportunity for work, but it can also put you in a really unpleasant position when you get the contract and start doing the work and you realize that you can't live up to some of the claims you make in that because AI misunderstood what was being said in the original call, and you never did what you needed to do in terms of due diligence to make sure that it aligned with your capabilities.
Exactly. So, and from there, we've got a good start now. So we've, with what Steve had said, we've got through those first 2 steps. So we've identified what the use looks like. We've categorized it properly by the nature of risk. The next thing is deciding who owns that AI influenced work. So once it's visible, we need ownership to be clear, and especially in smaller organizations, but I think this applies generally across the board. The person who approves, sends, or relies on the output owns that outcome, even when AI is involved. So in other words, AI may have made a mess, but the human in the loop, as Steve had mentioned that term, we as the humans need to be the ones who are ultimately accountable and responsible. We can't blame the AI, even if AI generated the wrong thing. So to do that, we need to define some responsibilities organizationally. Who uses AI to produce the work? Who reviews the output? Who makes the final call? And if there is something that seems wrong, if we need to escalate, who steps in when something doesn't seem right? And again, in smaller teams, one person may cover several of these roles. So even if it's the same name 3 out of 4 times, don't skip these bullet points because all 4 of those are really important. Go ahead. And so on this one, the outcome is that we want clear ownership for AI influence work, especially in those higher impact areas. Steve, anything on this one before we proceed?
No, I think you landed it. We can move forward.
Sounds good. Okay, so this scenario, we've got a quarterly marketing campaign email. Our marketing coordinator uses AI to send an email or to draft an email for a new service package. We use AI, it does a good job at this sort of thing, suggests subject line, benefit statements, and a limited time offer. The team lead skims for tone and grammar. The business owner approves and sends to the full customer list. The ownership clarity on this was that the marketing coordinator was the use initiator. The output reviewer was the team lead, and the final decision owner was the business owner. But the risk that we have here, from my perspective, in this very real world scenario, if the offer terms are misunderstood by customers, it's on the sender, not the tool. And in this case, it was the business owner. If we did not have this explicit ownership, though, the owner, if we go back and we look at this, the team lead only is skimming for tone and grammar. They're not checking the accuracy of the service package, pricing details, any of the things that we would want to make sure before we send an email to customers that we had our points right. If the team lead and the business owner assume that one another are the ones that are verifying the entirety of the accuracy of the content, that's what happens without good governance. In this scenario, if those were clarified, we wouldn't have to worry about that because the business owner approves and they understand that the team lead was only looking for tone and grammar. So whatever those rules are, the important thing, we're not being prescriptive about which ones you apply, but it needs to be clear about who has which areas of ownership and clarity. Steve, anything on this one?
Yeah, basically, you covered most of that there. The biggest thing to take away from this slide is these responsibilities and roles, final decision owner versus reviewer. That has to be, if it's reviewing for grammar and spelling, then that is the name of the role. You want to clearly define what it is that's going on, that each person has to do. Otherwise, there's these assumptions that spread and cause errors to come through.
So the fourth then is setting those, now that we've got our use identified, now that we've got our owners identified, we now, with the combination of those items, again, everything in this plan builds upon what we've already built. Everything uses that as a stepping stone for the next step. So the next is to set those early expectations for AI use so that everybody in our organization, regardless of size, has some basic shared understanding about how to use AI responsibly as we continue to roll AI out in our organization. Again, that's not monolithic. It's not like updating the latest version of Office or whatever the case may be. AI adoption is going to take so many different forms, as we've talked about. So it's an ongoing evolution. We want to have those basic expectations. As Steve had pointed out earlier, very wisely, we want to have that foundation as well, that people know how to make good decisions about something that hasn't happened as of yet, that's new. We want to have that foundation in terms of what's driving how we assess whether something is an appropriate use or not an appropriate use or a risky use. So some areas to consider for those early expectations are Is it okay to use these tools for internal drafting and analysis, internal decision support? How about client-facing communication? Okay, that starts to change. How about hiring, financial, legal, or policy-related decisions? You can tell by my voice, I think I dropped an octave and got very serious in tone. That fourth bullet point, those are the areas, as you saw in those prior slides about what's the worst that could happen. That's where we start getting into trouble. So this is progressively more areas of risk from here. But whatever this is, again, it's going to be unique to your organization, your context, what you're comfortable with, where you have risk, where you don't, whatever that is in your org. But defining those expectations and making sure they're clearly articulated helps everybody understand, when it's okay to use these tools without a whole lot of oversight, basic guidance, where you need more and where you can't use it at all. The important thing is we want your organizational specific. This is not a one size fits all. Shared understanding in your organization at this point in time about how AI can be used, especially during that early adoption.
Yeah.
So the internal analysis versus client delivery as a scenario. So in this particular scenario, we will allow that AI can be used to summarize internal project notes and to rewrite internal drafts for clarity. AI is, I think for the most part, my perspective, I think Steve and ours, we use this quite extensively. These are scenarios that AI works quite well and that there's limited risk with some huge caveats. Conditional, we alluded to this on the prior slide, AI generated client emails must be rewritten and reviewed. We don't want emails being written directly by AI and then sent out. Bad things can happen, as you can only imagine and may have even seen. And then not allowed, as we alluded to those last bullet points, especially that fourth one on the prior slide. No AI generated pricing, no AI generated legal or contract interpretations. Those are just not areas that we're comfortable with using AI for all of the right reasons. The risk is substantial. So the benefits are that staff know which uses are low risk. They know where review is expected before external sharing, and they know which decisions are off limits. And again, simple shared understanding. This isn't a 20-page policy document. I mean, it's 5 bullet points. And that's the level of detail that really can help folks with that level of clarity. Steve, anything on this slide before we go forward?
John mentioned in the allowed, there are some huge caveats. And some of the things that we've been running into recently using AI to help generate copy for summaries, for discovery findings, is AI's choice of vocabulary sometimes can be very different than the way we communicate in terms of specific tasks or elements of a project. So that's one of the big things that we've been having to look out for is, does this term even make sense within the context of this bigger conversation we're having with a client? So even if it's allowed, we still need some of that review before just pushing it to the public. That's all.
Absolutely. And in our book, which we will be sharing more details on later this month, big reveal, but we talk in far more detail about not just having folks review, but the people who are allowed, as Steve had just mentioned, the people who are allowed to be the reviewers need to be knowledgeable enough on those particular items that the review is not just grammatical, that the person, if it is something that is deeply technical, that person needs to have that level of technical depth. If it's related to product or legal terms, financial, whatever that may be, that it can't just be that it's another reviewer. It is an expert level of review based on the level of content that's there. So to Steve's point, there are a lot of instances where the challenges that you'll find even in those allowed instances are, this isn't the way that our humans speak. So even though the output is accurate, does it align with our voice? Those are the sorts of things that you will decide organizationally about what or how you want to tune. And also, when it's allowed, or is it conditional in that instance? Again, that is your decision to make in your organization. And I would suggest we revisit this on a probably monthly basis. You may want to do it quarterly, but the universe keeps changing, but evolve it in such a way that, again, it's the lightest weight way of governance that also ensures that You don't lose what your brand is. You don't lose what your ethics are that are part of your organization.
Yes.
So next, connecting AI use to business priorities. So even though we know that we've got some active sort of DIY, in most cases, AI use that's out there today, as we start looking at choosing some use cases, we want to be business thinking, like business folks thinking about profitability, efficiency, impact, those sorts of things that business folks think about. We want to connect our AI use to business priorities. We want to avoid what I have referred to far before AI as SOS, the shiny object syndrome. There's a lot of really neat, fun stuff you can do with AI. But a lot of those things, although they're shiny, they don't move the needle in terms of your organizational outcomes. So we need to have our business leader hats on and thinking about what is the best and highest purpose that we can allocate to AI, and also to not try to do everything. I mean, these are
Some
just
of these things that AI can do may feel like it would augment your business and help, like your supplement your ability to get things done, but really it's a new learning curve and it's new output that needs to be reviewed. So you really want to be, especially for business uses of AI, discerning and aware of the impact and the amount of effort that it will take to even implement. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just like any good, we think of ROI, right? Before AI, there was ROI and there still is. What is the return on investment? And AI shouldn't be different just because it's new and interesting and shiny. We should say this is a tool that we can use. How do we apply it so that we receive more than whatever we invested? And again, even if it's a nonprofit, we still want to make sure that what we're spending, what we're putting into this tool is giving us at least that much in returns for the things that matter to our organization. Again, that's going to be unique to your org. But some useful questions to ask, irrespective of industry, domain, et cetera, is what problem is this AI use helping us to solve? Who is depending on that output? What happens when the output is wrong? And how does it support business goals? So the question is, and we find this again outside of AI, but the question is not, is this a good idea or not? Is this a good use or not? Those sort of binary black and white, is it a good use or not? The answer often is, that's a good use of AI. But the question is, when I've got 10 different things that are good, which of those 10 is going to be the most impactful in a positive way to the organization? So that's what we really want to do. We want to get past the, is this useful? Does it work? Is AI effective here? To say, beyond that, does it move the needle enough for this to be an area of focus for what we need in our org? We really always want to make sure, like good business people, think like an entrepreneur, the AI use should be connected to work that actually matters to our mission, our goals, and our outcomes. We want, as part of this, again, not just that those are the right high priority, highly impactful scenarios, use cases to use, but note the phrase small set. So to do this well, and this governance plan contemplates doing, one or up to a couple of small use cases in this 90-day period, they have to be small enough to be done and measurable from that time frame. We can't pick a bunch of different things and try to do them in parallel, especially if we're a smaller org. But I would say even in dealing with enterprises, you don't want to have 20 different AI experiments happening simultaneously. It's just not a viable, practical way to solve it. Steve, any additional thoughts on this?
It's really tempting with the capabilities of these tools to try to build like a one size fits all full solution to all of your needs in one sort of base 44 application, or one of these tools that you can build apps in Google AI Studio. There are a ton of them out there, and it can be really tempting to try to build a whole new interface for your whole company to try to start using. But the learning curve on that is crazy high, and your business has been working for a long time without these AI tools. So think about how you could make one element of your business more efficient, two pieces. But trying to refresh and reawaken your entire business with AI tools is only going to set you back and open up way more opportunity for risk. So very
Absolutely. Yeah, and we really want to have those high value. We want to have some early wins as well. That's really important. We believe in incremental delivery and ideation and those sorts of just sort of key principles of modern product delivery. And so it's really important that we don't have these big monoliths. We can't have a 18-month AI project, but we could have 18 one-month AI experiments. Those are the sorts of things that we want to be thinking about. So here's a scenario that we can think about that would be high value. Customer support ticket process response. So our business priority is that we want to respond within 24 hours, huge caveat, without losing that personal tone. We've all received awful customer service emails that are, thank you, valued customer. Like, we don't want to do that. We can do better. We've got real human beings that do a real great job. So let's see what we can do to help them. So these great human beings that we have on our customer support team, they can use AI to draft some replies to common billing questions. Common billing questions, and that terminology is going to come in real important in just a moment. All of the AI output that these support reps will use AI for, they'll review and edit as needed before sending. But as I had mentioned the point prior, the support rep cannot use AI, support reps cannot use AI to use language, generate language or policy for refunds, policy commitments, those sorts of things. So again, this is another area where it's not monolithic. Can we use AI as customer support reps? And the answer in this real world scenario is yes, you absolutely can. But even in that box, as a customer service rep responding to customer inquiries via email, of that box, this part of the box, the answer is yes, you can use AI here as long as it's reviewed properly by somebody who is knowledgeable enough. But this box, the high risk stuff, commitments, contracts, policies, refunds, discounts, those sorts of things that there's a quantifiable real world impact, the answer is no. And the answer may be no for the foreseeable future. It may change at some point. As Steve had mentioned, these things change a lot. So, but this is something that there is high value. We've solved a problem, our response backlog, and being able to respond in a timely manner. So it moved the needle. That's a real quantifiable business problem that all of us understand, right? I expect a response back from a human being to my request within 24 hours. You know, that can be difficult for some organizations. Can AI help? Absolutely. We've got this dependency, though. Our customers rely on accurate explanations. I wouldn't even, calling that a dependency feels almost a little bit weird. I would expect they'd be accurate, but that is what we need to provide. If we fail at this, though, we've got a loss of trust and there'll be escalation. So if we provide the wrong answer, it's bad for everybody. There's another level 2, level 3 rep that's involved. All of those things happen. It's made it a net negative. But our goal is that we want efficiency with accountability. So here we've got a simple, pragmatic, everybody can understand this policy. It'd be very easy. You could document it quicker than I could talk through the slide, and that people could start getting value out of this almost immediately. That's the type of high lift, low risk that we're talking about. Steve, anything to add to this?
In this case, one thing that might be a part of this scenario would be a training or knowledge base that's based on past support tickets or company policy. But one of the biggest takeaways from this slide that I see is the fact that there is a failure impact for any AI application. And without guardrails, like if we just had the first 3 bullet points on this arrow and no guardrails saying you can't have anything about refunds or policy commitments, then it will automatically try to do that if you don't put those guardrails in place. So being aware of what could happen if this new solution fails and how to prevent that and in what instances it's really critical to explicitly say, no, can't use it for this. That's
Right.
really important with AI these days.
Yeah, very much appreciate that. And yeah, and again, it's like it's not binary. Like, in this instance, it's a some of this is good, some of it's bad. But to your point, the tool, we need to direct the tool in a very precise way. Otherwise, it will do exactly what you say. It will happily give you bad advice or advice that is risky there. Refunds, billing, give him everything and more, right? I mean, those are the sorts of things on those earlier slides about like the Air Canada chatbot. Those are some of the scenarios where, you could trick the AI into giving you a refund, or somebody got a car for $1, as I recall, because they negotiated that with the car dealerships. Bot that real world scenario. So those are the sorts of things. You've got some bad actors, bad intentions out there trying to break the system, as Steve had mentioned earlier as well. We want to be cognizant of that. So the next is really from that analysis, what are the use cases that we carry forward? So we've got them understood from the use that's out there today, some ideas about where it might be useful for the organization. From there, we can start finishing up our first 30 days and looking at what we're going to be focusing on phase 2. So we can look at, again, objectively assessing those scenarios. Where is there that clear business value and reasonable risk, like the example we just went through? Where there's data that's available and appropriate. So some of these things presuppose that there is data that is available to inform the AI. If that's not there, if you don't have the data, or if the data quality is bad or it's hard to get at, then that might not be a good scenario. And then again, work that fits the current team capacity. So ultimately, a lot of this work should be net improvement for folks as far as efficiency and workload. But in some cases, especially initially, as Steve had mentioned, things like training, there's just some overhead in terms of getting up and running. So even though it's not forever, we need to be thoughtful about what's already on people's plates. As mentioned before, most organizations will come out of this phase going into phase 2 with 1 to 3 strong candidates. And the outcome that we're looking at is that there's just that agreement on which use cases move into design and prototyping. We want to get 1 to 3 things done in those 90 days rather than starting 90 things and getting none of them done. So that's really important here. Steve, anything before we go to the next slide?
Yeah, just a thought. As you get to this point, you come out with 3 possible use cases and you realize that that you don't have the capacity to implement any of them. That's where you go back to the beginning and set new foundations for this evaluation process. Think about how much availability you currently have, how much is on your team's workload, and what you have the capacity to actually implement. Because it's great to find a solution that could solve huge problems, but if you can't implement it in a reasonable amount of time and test it, then there's no point in trying to jump into that and making yourself unavailable for other work that you could actually get paid on.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, as we talked about in some of the other scenarios, it may be that you look at a scenario and you don't have the bandwidth that Steve had mentioned to do that. Are there ways to break that into smaller pieces so that you can get a subset of that done and then do more of it at a later date? But yes, we want to be realistic. The people who are doing this work already are likely at 100% capacity. So we're going to have to figure out ways to work within those real world constraints. So in this particular scenario, these are ones that should be relatively lightweight in most organizations to implement. And these are real world, realistic ones. So again, they may or may not apply for you, but these are ones that are real worldy in terms of, we can use AI to summarize our internal meetings. We can use it to draft internal process documentation that we use for new hires, other team members, et cetera. And then we can use it to rewrite our existing website, frequently asked questions, for clarity. Right now, in this scenario, real world-ish, we're going to exclude it from resume screening summaries. We saw what happened on that first slide with Workday. We don't want that to happen. We want to exclude it from pricing recommendations. We don't want to be giving away our services and product for $1. And contract language generation, we really want to leave that to people who are who have JD degrees, who are lawyers. That is not an area where we are comfortable with AI, because we wouldn't know if it's wrong and we could get ourselves into a lot of legally binding trouble. And why these were chosen? Well, clear time savings. There's a direct quantifiable organizational impact. We will save X amount of time by implementing these things. There's limited external exposure, really very frequently asked questions on the website. There should be very little risk there. There's non-sensitive data input. So if we're thinking about anything that is in there, the vast majority of that should be, there could be some restrictions in terms of the internal meetings, depending on the meeting. And that might be a restriction that you say other than meetings about personnel. But those are the sorts of instances where you have the ability to be a little bit more specific if need be, but we've got those non-sensitive data inputs, and that the review, as Steve had mentioned, fits the current team capacity. So by the end of phase one, we're getting close to the 30 days. We're getting close to our hour for this session. But at the end of phase one, teams should have a practical view of their current AI use, clarity on where AI is influencing those outcomes, named owners for responsibility, those early expectations shared with the entirety of the organization about AI use, and that short list of aligned use cases for the next phase. The outcome is that all of these outputs should be easy to understand, easy to update, and useful to guide day-to-day conversations.
One thing we didn't go in a lot of detail on is, and because this is AI governance, that's what we're focusing on. But it's really crucial also to be aware of the existing workflows with technology and like physical analog sort of work that your business is doing in order to understand how and when AI might fit into any of those workflows. So a broader picture of what people are doing and why and how. It can be really helpful in this as well.
Absolutely. And at the end of this phase, what are the actual artifacts, the documents that are created? Well, based on what we just talked about what those outcomes are, the artifacts would be an inventory showing where AI is being used. We had a very low fidelity mock-up of that. Obviously, you can build your own, but keep it lightweight, but do it. Identify decision points influenced by AI output. Again, keep it lightweight, but document where we're using those decision points that are influenced by AI output. Again, all of this lightweight documentation on your SharePoint site, Confluence, wherever you put this sort of guidance, named owners for review and approval by function. So what needs to be reviewed by whom, how, under what circumstances, etc. Written expectations for acceptable AI use by category. Also, these are the policies by different labeling, but these written expectations really are our organizational policies. And that short approved list of use cases that we're going to take us into phase two. What done looks like at day 30. So we talked about those pillars. The first, business alignment. Second, data and tool discipline. Third, risk, ethics, and accountability. So what done looks like, what did we get for those first 30 days? We actually got a lot. So our current AI use is visible across the org. We know where AI is influencing our decisions. We are connecting meaningful use to a real business problem. We've got that list of use cases that we're going to actually implement in this 90-day phase. And we've got explicit acknowledgement for everyone to know what is out of scope, which is probably even more important than saying what is in scope, so that folks know what we're not doing. So how about data and tool discipline? There's shared awareness of which tools are being used today. We've got those clear practical boundaries for sensitive and restricted data. We've got common expectations for prompt discipline and minimizing inputs. That really just means that we want to be thoughtful about not providing limitless data into the information that we're providing for these tools. It can be problematic for the tools, but it also could include things like PII, PCI, protected data, those sorts of things. So in some cases, less actually is more. Also, for this discipline, understanding that these AI outputs are drafts, not sources of truth, and an understanding of the reuse and the compounding risk of using AI and then reusing what AI generated for derivative products. And then finally, the risk, ethics, and accountability. We've got those named owners. We've got clear expectations about how things work, who reviews, when, how we escalate. There's an agreement on where fairness, accuracy, or trust requires extra scrutiny. And that alignment, as Steve had mentioned, the human in the loop, that everyone understands in your organization that responsibility is with the people, not with the tool. Even though the tool generated that outcome, it is us, those who are the humans in the loop, who are all completely accountable for that. And then we end with that readiness to design those guardrails in phase 2. And so moving forward, as we conclude this time here, our first actions include doing our kickoff, having a sponsor, which is really important internally in your organization, who can help be the executive, who will support this change, lead by example, as we talked about earlier, that leadership. Defining and aligning on scope, what we had just talked about, so that everybody in the org understands this. Having a task force who can help support you on this journey. Defining that first use case or first set of use cases. And then sharing that governance program, what we just talked about here, with your staff. Steve, anything more on this as we conclude our session?
This is great. Some of you might do these in a slightly different order. You may appoint your sponsor, then create a task force and use that task force to define, align, and establish your first use case. But these are all things that happen pretty quickly, and they need to happen before anything else. So that's what's most important to take away from that.
Perfect. All right. Well, as we're concluding this hour, Steve and I really just want to say thank you again for making the time. We hope that this has been helpful for all of you. Feel free to reach out to us. All right, we've got a QR code here. Happy to help. Happy to just continue the conversation. So if this is a journey that you haven't started yet and you just want to talk about it a little bit, if it's a journey that you're on and you might like some support, we're happy to talk with you. If you're on that journey and you're running into some problems, we'd be happy to talk with you as well. So wherever you are, if you would like some collaboration, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to just have that conversation with you and see if we might be able to help in any particular way. So with that, I will go ahead and stop here. And Steve and I will just say thank you again. We really appreciate this. Appreciate you joining. Hope that you found this helpful. And as Stephen mentioned earlier, if you go to YouTube and our YouTube channel, you can watch the prior session. And we'll be doing phase 2, building on this next month. So any last words, Steve, before we end our stream and end our session today?
Thanks everybody who attended and anybody else who watches it later on. And thank you, John, for hosting this. I think this is really great. Next time, maybe we will be open to comments throughout. I meant to say something at the beginning of this call, but next time I'll be receptive to comments so that we can respond live. But really appreciate y'all coming and thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks. Thanks.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye.